amidst the commemorations, a major review of Australia's defence strategy was released, pitched by Defence Minister Richard Marles as the blueprint for defence thinking for decades to come. It called for an expanded air and missile defence network in Australia, more long-range strike weapons, and to reassess if defence's role in disaster relief is appropriate. John Glenn is the Managing Director of Kia Consulting. John himself is a retired Army... I better get your title right, John. Maybe I'll bring you on. You can tell me yourself. G'day, John.
Hello, Rebecca.
Army officer, that's it, isn't it?
Oh, correct.
My apologies. First of all, can I ask, where did you spend Anzac Day yesterday?
Oh, I always sneak in for the dawn service at my local in Yass, New South Wales.
And what do you reflect on as the sun rises on Anzac Day?
Oh, that's well, a lot actually. I talking to some people, I always find that a bit of a hard day actually. Look, I think certainly those over the decades who have given their ultimate sacrifice for us, and they're amazing. They're just the bravery and the courage, but also their families, the ones who stay behind, and the contemporary ones who are here. That families carry a huge burden. We often forget about them. And I think so I think that's pretty amazing. And then there's the burden that those who have returned, no one goes away and comes back unchanged. And for some of them, that burden is really heavy. And we clearly struggle with it with contemporary veterans and veteran suicide. So
yes.
They'll pay a bit heavy.
Which makes, I think, the Defence Strategic Review and the timing around Anzac Day even more poignant as we look back and we look forward to the next couple of decades. What stood out to you in this report?
Oh, look, I think the clarity of focus is good. So it's definitely saying, look, we've got a problem. There's an increasing strategic challenge for us, and we need to restructure ourselves to deal with that and to face and a different way. It was quite reasonable, I think, for Minister Marles to say, look, I've come in, I've got a new portfolio. Just where do we stand? What are the strategic circumstances, and how should we restructure ourselves? And I think they've done a reasonable job of that.
A lot of the language in it is pretty opaque to the average person, John. So the review looked at, and I'm quoting here, enhancing Australia's conventional deterrence capability in the short term. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think it's opaque to everybody, I think, when you say it that way. Look, certainly everybody wants to say conventional because the alternative is nuclear. So we're not going nuclear. And, of course, with the language around nuclear-powered submarines, conventional weapons are nuclear-powered. So you see conventional all of the time because that's just to keep everybody clear. It is about, they do say it's about increasing our deterrence. So I think the increasing threat that faces us is belligerence, coercion is the great word. I think is a great word that describes this. So there's economic coercion and there's military coercion. There's a whole range of things, and that I think is what we're facing. And what we want to make sure is that if we were being coerced, we would be able to respond to that appropriately. And I think that's the challenge. It's not necessarily about defending the shores, because our lifeline, and the report brings this out, the review brings this out, our lifeline is about our maritime trade, our ability to work internationally in the cyberspace, for example, the space domain, and how we work with the satellites and all the things that are going on in there. And all those things become accessible, and we need to be able to protect it, defend against it, and I say deter.
Yes. And when you say coercion, John, by who? Is there a specific, not enemy, that's too strong a word, but country of concern?
I think it's clear that China, the growing influence of China, and it's not that people don't want China to build and develop economically, they just wanted to do it alongside and in accordance with the rules of behaving well with everyone else. And we're seeing some behaviours in there that suggest that they're they want to build their own rules, and not the rules that abide by anywhere else. And we do see their coercion. I mean, the restriction of free travel through the South China Sea, for example, and we see that that is a coercive move, right? It's a projection of their power and influence that doesn't follow the normal behaviours, and that's what everyone's concerned about.
It does sort of, I don't know if you've seen that Utopia skit that's being shared around at the moment, the satirical show where there is a defence strategic review of some sort where, the guy in charge is saying, well, so what we're doing is protecting our biggest and most important trading partner, China, from our biggest and most important trading partner, China.
Yeah. Yes. It does. So but I think that's the challenge. Is we talk about China have this program called the Belt and Roads Initiative, right? So which was all about in them investing in infrastructure around the world and in the South Pacific and elsewhere, and there was a review that said, look, the return to the economy is like $7 trillion in 2040 when that occurs. So that's extraordinary, and everybody wants to do that. What you don't want it to do, though, is to bring people into a debt that they can't service, and so there becomes an influence and a power over by China into regions because of the debt that they generate, because it all looks too good on the other side. And so it's not. I think you're right. We don't want to have an enemy, but it would also be unwise not to be prepared to deal with behaviours that we can't accommodate.
You're listening to John Glenn, the Managing Director of Kia Consulting. This is ABC Radio Brisbane. This week, the Defence Strategy Review was released. Some detail in there, of course, a lot not available to the public, possibly for obvious reasons. But at the same time, the government, Defence has to do a good job of explaining, or I guess justifying to the Australian public the spend, but also, the more explanation there is, perhaps it takes away some of the fear that comes with announcements like $4.1 billion committed to long-range strike systems, manufacturing longer-range munitions. John, it also looked at the challenges of recruiting and training enough people. How big a challenge was outlined in the review?
Oh, I think it was undersold. It's enormous. And I'll need to think about it in different ways. So they've looked at repurposing the reserves, making sure that they've got a role because in base protection and so on in the north of Australia. They've looked at they'll need to look at how they recruit. I mean, the submarine force itself is going to have an extraordinary numbers of people who are going to need to volunteer to hang around in a submarine underwater for months at a time. I mean, that's not everybody. So they're going to have to find ways to do that in ways that they haven't done that before, and I think that will take some out of the box thinking. It's a big problem, big challenge.
Yeah. It also, again, coming back to the timing of the release of the report, and I mean, you don't want to overthink or read too much into that in terms of Anzac Day, but it did, as the nation focused on what we have been to and contributed to and sacrificed previously, and as we look ahead, what did you think on the timing of the release of this report?
Oh, I didn't focus on it very much, and just because they may, some people will say they don't put it on Anzac Day because they want it to be hidden and not seen. Others to put it next to Anzac Day because it will give more importance to it. I think just for me, I just read the report and make a decision. It hasn't stopped the debate, so linking it to Anzac Day, maybe they were looking for an extra point or two, but I don't think it actually matters. I mean, the substance of the report's not bad, Rebecca. It's got some good things in it. It's got some prosaic things in it, and it's missing some bits and pieces. So, in my view,
what's missing?
Oh, it hasn't got money for a start. So it is. There is a big spend spoken about it, but it doesn't talk about how to get that, and we'll need to think about that. And it's a hard question. It's where do you find the money? And the reality is, what they're proposing can't come out of the existing defence budget. So we're going to have to find some more money to do that. Otherwise, it's just another noisy review that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, well, you can't cut defence to spend on defence, but it's one of our biggest spends. So are there examples in the past? Because, I mean, there have been similar strategic reviews, I think, in 2009, 2013, 2016, 2020. What does get cut? Are there other projects scrapped?
Well, they will. They have recommended that low priority projects go and Defence take money out of it. I think that there is money to be found in the defence budget, and I just say that because they're not. The bureaucracy is not very commercially sensitive. It hasn't got a lot of commercial acumen. So I think it can be smarter with the way it deals with the big companies. And get more of that commercial acumen in their engagement with them and to drive some of the costs out. Some of the bureaucracy in the big projects and so on is overrated. There's just too much of it, so you can reduce a lot of costs in that. But it won't give you the big numbers that you need. I mean, they've cut the infantry fighting vehicles from 450 to 129. The cost per vehicle will go up as a consequence. But it will be a big saving. But if you actually needed more vehicles, which I suspect they do, you got to find that money from somewhere. Put the picture on the other side, though. For decades we've been banking what they call the peace dividend. Right, at the end of the Vietnam War, we cut the military, we cut the army back, we reduced the budgets. And we call it a peace dividend. At the end of the Cold War, we did the same again and said, we don't have the same threat. We're going to reduce the budgets, reduce the spend and do all of those things. But now is the time to come back and say, well, we've enjoyed the benefits of that peace dividend. Now's the time to say, well, actually, we need to find some money to do some other stuff.
John, it's not just you reading the report or the Defence Minister. Presumably, it's also China. Has there been any response from them?
I think the reports are... I've got no insight into this, but I think the reports that I've seen is that they've just made a fairly typical response to it. Nothing outrageous. We just said, "Oh yes, okay, you've got a review and you made these comments." I think, and we don't mean, and you're misreading us. I think is really what they're saying.
All right. Well, there's hopefully more talks to come before long-range munitions are required. Really appreciate your analysis as always, John. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Rebecca. Bye.
John Glenn, now retired Army officer. He's now the Managing Director of Kia Consulting.